Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesdays. We're very glad you're with us. It's November 4th, 2020. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions, we ask that you please just open up the chat box, enter any comments you have into the chat box. For those people watching on Facebook, we've got 7 people currently on Facebook. Please just enter your comments into the comment field. I am monitoring that feed, and I'll be sure to get those questions answered as our speaker pauses to take questions. For those people on Zoom, if you're using a PC or Mac, we ask that you use the speaker view, which is in the lower left-hand corner. That way you can adjust the size of the speaker and the PowerPoint slides by dragging with that little red arrow. As you'll see a couple of white dots, and you can drag that back and forth to adjust the aspect ratio of each side. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and on the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you post a comment in the chat box or have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your comments, name, and picture to appear. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. I founded Career DFW back in 2008 to help the unemployed in the DFW area. In 2012, I started CareerUSA.org to help people outside the DFW area. I also have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. You're welcome to drive by the house. I will do the domino disc, throw it through your car window as long as you don't drive too fast for 10 bucks a piece, or you can buy it on Amazon for $15 a piece. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team. Well, our speaker today is Mark McDonald. We're doing a special guest interview speaker series, the 13-part series that we just completed last week. All those episodes, and I'll point out at the end of this show, at the end of this workshop, all the 13 episodes are on the Career USA YouTube channel. You can go back and view it anytime you want. But for the months of November and December, we're going to have a different speaker every week talking about interviewing from their point of view. So this week, Mark McDonald's with us from the Practice Interview team, and his topic is going to be Confident Candidate, Lessons from the Pit Crew. So Mark, thank you for being with us, and it's all yours.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jeff. And yeah, so we've done 13 sessions, and my goal for today, and I will achieve it, is to cover all 13 sessions in about an hour. I have shortened it a bit from the last time I did it, so I'm pretty confident I can get it done in the hour and a half we have allotted. So that means we're going to spend about 5 or 6 minutes per topic. And I'll make reference to those presentations, and as Jeff mentioned, we'll show the whole list at the end, and they're all available to be viewed. And so each one of those topics we cover in an hour, or sometimes a little bit longer than an hour. So we'll hit the highlights here, and then that may help you focus on what webinars you want to watch in the future. So I lead the Dallas Pit Crew. My qualifications for that is I was laid off 3 times in my career the last 10 years of it, between 2002 and 2012. And I was laid off. I did some of the laying off myself, and I have, a unique, I guess, perspective on, how to get back to work and how to interview well. And in 2012, that's when I got involved in the Pit Crew. I'll talk some more about it when I get into my presentation. And for this particular side, just pay attention to the email there, dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me. And also, I want to say that as part of my Pit Crew activities, I also coach, but I just coach on one topic. That's why did you leave your last position? We're going to talk very briefly about that today. If you have in any way a complicated answer to that question, we should have a conversation, and there's no charge for that coaching. We'll talk about how to answer that initial question, why did you leave your last position, but also any follow-up questions that may be generated based on your situation. And so I have a coaching session right after this, as a matter of fact. So don't think, that if your situation is complicated, that's, something you can't get help with. reach out to me. I'm also looking for volunteers always. We've had 3 panelists land in the last 3 weeks. I don't think any one of them have made the announcement yet, but still they're they're working now and they're unavailable to be volunteers. So if you've been a hiring manager, I'd love to talk to you about helping out with the pit crew. And then finally, I encourage you to link in with me, and there's my LinkedIn profile. You can search for pit crew, you can search for Mark initial A McDonald, and you'll find me very quickly. And just send me a brief note that said how we met, and I'll add you to my network, which is filled with lots of people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that I've met through the pit crew and also through my professional responsibilities in the IT infrastructure business. And I want to say that I'd like for first timers, do we have any first timers today? We have about 30 people online now and 7 or 10 probably on Facebook. So if you're a first timer, would you put that in the chat window? Just put first time. And I encourage all the other participants who aren't first timers, to recognize them and reach out to them. And of course, we all help each other get to our next position by working together. And so that's, one thing we did naturally when we were meeting together, but it takes a little more effort now that we're in the virtual world. So I'm gonna pause for a moment while you guys do that and open up my screen that I want to share.
And for those people on Facebook, please go ahead and let us know if you're a first time watching this.
Yeah, there's Walt there. Do you want to let Walt introduce himself real quick?
Walt, if you'd like to, please go ahead.
I'm Walt Glass. What else?
I hear you have a workshop. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. I'll put a little information in the chat. It's a learning without squirming free workshop on the fundamentals and basics of differentiation and selling. I do I help. Let me shorten it by just say, look me up on LinkedIn. You need to be registered to attend. There's information there about how to reach me. Learning without squirming.
Very good. Thanks, Walt. And
thanks for the opportunity, John.
Welcome, Leslie and Cindy. There we go. Thanks for posting that up. So if you guys have questions while I'm going through this, I tend to get pretty focused on what I'm saying and presenting, but go ahead and type your questions in, and Jeff will interrupt me if it's something urgent, but I'll pause occasionally and we'll go through those questions. So this presentation is how to be a confident candidate, lessons from the pit crew. And so I've been doing this now for about 8 years and have learned a lot about interviewing and seen, very good ways to do things, more, the most effective ways, I would say, and then other ways that are not as effective. And so I initially, after I'd been doing this for about 2 years, I started to put together this presentation and I called it Lessons from the Pit Crew. And the initial draft was all about, the mistakes that people make, because there's some common mistakes that occur all the time. But that was such a negative perspective. So I restructured the whole thing into, how to interview well. And then now there's just a couple of slides on common mistakes. Okay, but most of the information is here about how to get well prepared and, how to be a confident candidate and some of the things you're going to encounter. So that's what we'll do for the next hour. So what is the pit crew? What do we do? Okay, well, we call ourselves the practice interview team. Some people call it practice interview training, but I think it's practice interview team. The team part of that is the group of volunteers who give the interviews, the hiring managers. Okay, and we call them panelists. And so it's a volunteer group. We offer a safe and supportive environment for you to practice your interview skills, and you can practice as many times as you like. And being a volunteer organization, there's no cost to you at all for the opportunities to practice and to practice multiple times. And the record is 9 times. So we had one candidate a few years ago practice 9 times over about, 9 or 10 month period. So there you go. I think I can say, kind of guarantee that if you practice 9 times, you'll land, but I hope it takes less. Okay, but come as many times as you like. And you can practice for new positions. You can practice for the 2nd or 3rd round or fourth or fifth round for a position. A lot of people like to come and practice when they're going to have to go talk to the CEO. You can also practice if you don't have an opportunity in hand. Just find a job description that looks good to you, a dream, your dream job, so to speak, and send that in. And we'll give you an opportunity to convince a group of hiring managers, it's a panel interview, that you're the right person for that job. And you do that by sending it to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. Do you guys actually see my mouse when I'm moving it around? Yes, okay, there we go. That'll help. So our goal is to build your confidence that you can tell your story well in any interview situation. So it is a performance. Interviewing is a performance. Knowing what you're going to say when you're sitting at your kitchen table the night before the interview does not connect, is not sometimes not even indirectly connected to what actually comes out of your mouth. The pressure is on, in some extent, in an interview to have a good answer for any question, and all of those kinds of things require practice. Okay, so knowing is not doing. But here's what we're going to focus on, and here's the kind of things you learn with the interview. You learn to have a voice for every question. This may be a strategy, and I have some documents I'm going to share with you as well. And so, a voice for every question. I have this document called the 64 Toughest Interview Questions. You can find it online as well if you just search for that. But they besides giving the answers to some of these tough questions, they have a strategy for approaching tough questions, like, you don't have this degree in accounting that we require. But through engaging with the pit crew, you'll learn to have a voice for every question. You'll learn how to make a conversation in your interview, express your curiosity, ways to show enthusiasm, to demonstrate enthusiasm. You'll make effective choices. As you go through the interview and you get asked different questions in different ways from different interviewers, you may have a choice on how you answer that. And we'll talk about some of those choices, how you structure an answer. But that's another thing you learn through practice. With good preparation, you're going to learn to anticipate what the interviewer is going to be interested in. Okay, so now you go kind of to a different level. This also helps with having a conversation, but if you know how the interview is going to go, the things that they're going to be interested in, and how you want to respond to them, you're well ahead of the game. And so that just takes a little practice. And of course, if you aren't already, you need to understand that you are responsible for finding your next job. So for a lot of people, and this was true in my career as well, about the first 20 years of my career till I got laid off that first time, I really didn't have to interview that much. I mean, I got opportunities from previous bosses and people I may have met or worked with outside the company. They were interested in bringing me on board, and so we had a conversation, and I decided to go there. But so I never really had to work to find a new position, until I got laid off. And then, it's different. Things you have to go and find the opportunities for you, and you have to be well prepared for your interview. And you are responsible for finding your next job. It doesn't just arrive by fate. Okay, I mentioned some of the resources that I have. How to answer the 64 toughest interview questions. I'll post that up when we're done into the chat window. I draw on what Jay Fusaro teaches, and he's a coach now. He was an accountant. Now he's a career coach. And if you get a chance to hear Jay speak, he speaks regularly. Jeff had him on 6 months ago or so, maybe. I also borrow from Jay Arbetter, the Power Networking Strategy. Same deal. Jeff has him speak. He speaks around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He talks about how to network. And one I haven't put on here is I'm going to talk about some things I recently learned from Rex Sowett, who's a recruiter. He spoke at Frisco Connect maybe a month ago. Had some interesting things to say about how you handle the salary question. What are your salary requirements? So, take a look at these. There's other material. I mean, you can just do searches on Google. You need to kind of work on what you believe will work in your situation, because sometimes there's lots of options. And this is, let me put in a plug for the coaches that are involved with the pit crew. Walt is a coach, Carol Burkell is a coach, and Jack Bick is a coach, and they all volunteer with the pit crew. There's other coaches. You know, I'm most familiar with the ones who are volunteers for the pit crew. They can help you sort out what is best for you, what approach is best for you by discussing all the options with you, and what doesn't apply to your situation and what does apply to your situation. So Walt's workshop is free. I think the other two charge a nominal amount and donate quite a bit of free time to those who can't afford to pay. So don't hesitate to reach out to some of those resources to get some customization about how to approach interviewing. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Pit crew is the crew. You've seen some of my pictures that flash up here, the crew that helps you win the race. So we're going to talk about preparing for the race. We're talking about getting a good start. We're going to talk about making the interview a conversation, which is kind of the middle part of the race. We're talking about finishing strong. And then I think then we'll talk about post-race activities. I may have got these two out of order. And then the last couple of topics are, avoiding a crash, common mistakes that people make, things that people believe are effective that are just not. And then also how to differentiate yourself a little bit. So setting yourself apart from the crowd, from the pack, so to speak. We're going to cover some specific things. We're going to cover is your statement of enthusiasm, which answers the question, why are you here? Your opening statement, often introduced by tell me about yourself, but it could be other ways as well. Star stories, so these are structured stories, how to answer behavioral interview questions, and behavioral interview questions are quite popular these days, and that popularity has been growing over the years. They've been around for quite a while, and you will encounter them, no doubt. Some companies are almost exclusively star stories. Amazon, for instance, we know, and Google as well. Taking appropriate credit when you're using your star story. So this is one of the common mistakes that people make. Speaking too much or too little. How much time should you spend speaking? How much time should you spend encouraging the interviewer to talk? How to redirect a negative question into a positive response, and other miscellaneous confidence building topics like how to set yourself apart and show enthusiasm. Okay. Preparing for the race. So I think it's fair to say the more preparation, the more effective your interview is going to be. Okay. Now, sometimes you don't have a lot of time, and that's a good reason to have target companies. So in your downtime or in between time, you can be studying up on companies that look good to you. Target companies also mean you're taking control of your fate, of your destiny. You're searching out or seeking out roles in certain specific companies because you've done some research in advance or talked to people through informational interviewing and given you some indication that you would like to work there. So that will help with your preparation. And we have a whole, the webinar series has 5 sessions. So we spend 5 weeks going over how to prepare for an interview, preparing in general, preparing specifically, video interviewing, how to prepare for a video interview. So this is a big topic, and this is one of the places I'm just going to kind of brush the surface, okay? But you can go into Career USA on YouTube and find those 5 videos and, get a deep dive and all the different things you need to do to prepare and how to do that. But preparation is important to being confident. Okay, you want to have the information at hand. You want to know about the company. You want to know about yourself. You want to know how you can help. There's just a lot of preparation to be done. So if you're new to the job search, start getting prepared now. And in downtime, you can, lots of ways you can prepare, and I'll talk about that. Okay, so you're in your preparation, in your general preparation, you're thinking about, well, I might get asked about the processes I've used, the challenges I've had with coworkers or bosses, the time when I achieved something fantastic, the times when I maybe didn't achieve what I hoped I would achieve. I failed, or I made a mistake. So these are all kinds of questions you can expect. Why you're interested to come work for that company, why you're interested in that job. When you have an individual, when you're ready to go, for an interview, now you have a job description, you have something specific you should focus on. And so analyzing the job description, we spend a whole session on as well in the webinar. The goal is to kind of discern their most important priorities through the job description. And some job descriptions are very detailed, and some of them are amazingly sparse. So there's a lot of variation in job descriptions, but it will help if you look at a broader perspective. So you have one company's job description. You may do some research on that company and find out who their competitors are. You may go and look for job postings that the competitors are posting as well with a similar title. So you can take a larger perspective on what the job involves by branching out from just the sheet of paper you have in front of you from the target company. You could do informational interviews, right? If you're preparing in advance and you have your target companies and you want to be a project manager or a product manager or a sales rep or a quality assurance person, you can look for people inside those target organizations to talk to, okay? But when the interview comes up, you need to discern their important priorities from the information you've gleaned, the research you've done, and the documents that they've given you. And then you're going to have some customized star stories, okay, specifically associated with those themes and those needs they have. Okay, so you're aiming to be able to tell a story about how you helped a previous employer solve a problem or achieve a goal that is similar to what the job description has in it. Okay, so how you helped, focusing on how you helped. And so they will ask you questions about this. Okay, tell me about a time when you had a coworker who wasn't pulling their weight, or you disagreed with your boss. Okay, so that's a behavioral interview question. And you answer that question using the STAR format: situation, task, action, and result. And STAR stories are 60 to 90 seconds long. Okay, they're very brief, 120 to 180 words if you type them out. And being brief is better. So if you can answer it in a minute or less even, that's good as well. So they don't have to be a certain length. They need to be short. Okay, you don't need to take up the whole 90 seconds, I guess is what I'm saying. And for a particular interview, if you don't have much time, 3 to 5 specific STAR stories for things that appear in the job description is enough. Okay, but as you go through the process, as you may go through a second round, third round, so on and so forth, you need to have more and more STAR stories, and you're going to learn through the interview experience what kind of needs they have that may not have been in the job description, or where they focus their questions on, where you need to have more STAR stories. Now, just for example, a common thing in Amazon interviews when you make it to, I think, the third round, is they will tell you, we want to hear STAR stories about, 4 or 5 or 6 of their 14 principles. And they just don't want one. Okay, they'll say, tell me about a story where you gave great customer satisfaction. And so you tell them a story, 90 seconds later, and it's a great story. And then they say, well, okay, tell me another time. Okay, and tell me another time. They really go deep on their principles, and so they want to hear multiple stories. Initially, though, having 1 or 2 that focuses on a particular topic, like customer service, that's what they're focusing on in the job description, is enough to get you through those early rounds. You want to select topics that match to their most important priorities. And this is kind of a keyword that I use, and because at this point you're preparing for the race. And so what you have is the document they've given you and any research you've done on your own. But when you get into the interview, and so you're going to make an assessment of what those most important priorities are, and you're going to prepare your stories and questions you may want to ask. And don't wander from that. We had a candidate today that we interviewed. Here's a good example. So they worked at Bed Bath & Beyond for many years, or retail, and they were going for a job with Tractor Supply. So they had a good story. He had a great story about how he'd increased revenue and added a new kind of, or emphasized or improved a bridal registry that Bed Bath & Beyond had implemented and done. It's very successful, but Tractor Supply is never going to have a bridal registry. Okay, so that was a good story that missed the mark. Okay, missed the mark. So you need to focus on stories that are going to be relevant to the company that you're interviewing with. Okay, I mentioned, I think we have a whole session on asking questions and preparing your questions in advance is important. So, and there's two aspects of this. There's the questions that you want to ask at the beginning of the interview and the questions that you want to ask at the end of the interview, and we'll cover those here in just a second. But there's also questions that occur in the middle or perhaps in the end where you're trying to figure out if this is a good fit for you. Okay, so you want to think about the kinds of questions you want to ask them. Yeah, for instance, if you're concerned about the culture, you've seen some bad reviews on Indeed, you may want to ask the hiring manager, when was the last time they got a chance to promote somebody, and why was it that particular person got promoted? Okay, so that's a really good question to ask, because if they say, yeah, I promoted Joe from to a manager because he was here like every day of the week, sometimes on the weekends, is highly committed to the organization, and so there you go. If you work hard, like 60, 90 hours a week, you might get promoted. That may or may not be for you, but that's the kind of question you want to think about asking. Ask it in a positive way, right, to elicit a positive response, but you're going to get information, that may be very helpful if you've got some sense that might be a concern for you. So prepare your questions in advance. Opening questions. Here's a couple of them. What was it about my background that interests you the most? This is a good one to use on the phone. If you get a call from a recruiter, you can even make it more specific and not say background. Is what was it that you learned about me that interests you the most? Okay, because they may have it may be a referral. Okay, and so they may say, well, here's what I know that Joe told me when he referred me to you. Okay, but you want to find out why they're interested in you. You want to find out what are the characteristics of top performers in this role. What are your most important priorities? Okay, so you can have a handful of these. I'll talk about how to use them in a minute, but these are some examples. You can also personalize these questions. What are the most important priorities from your perspective? Which elicits a more, so for instance, if you're not talking to the hiring manager, some of the interviewers may be reluctant to answer this question, especially if you ask for the most important priorities. They'll say, well, you're going to have to ask, the boss what that is, or, I work in the sales organization and you're interviewing an operation, so I don't really know the answer to that question. So, but they've obviously, they're interviewing you for a reason. So you may want to say, from your perspective, what are the most, what successful candidates what are the most successful candidates in this role? What are their characteristics, all right? So it's a very personalized question. The suggestion here, Ron Layton was a volunteer to pit crew for a couple of years, and we would talk about this every week, asking questions. And so he came up with the 10+1 rule. So you want to have 10 questions prepared in advance. You can have more, but you want to have 10 questions prepared in advance. And 5 of those questions you want to ask during the interview. Okay, don't wait till the end. You want to work those 5 questions into the interview. That was his goal. And then the +1 is, remember to ask for the job at the end of the interview. We'll talk about that coming up. But there you go. There's a good guideline. Got 10 questions. Now, you may not get to ask them all. You want to ask the ones that are the most important to you. And some of the answers may come up as a general part. You just you could ask a question, you give an answer, you find out the answer to the question. They may make a statement or something. But as far as preparation, have at least 10 questions that you'd like to ask. And then don't forget to ask for the job. We'll talk about that when we talk about closing. Now, another part of the preparation that I think maybe gets underappreciated but some people do this, is it's really helpful to understand, more about who you are. So you're in job transition now. You can start thinking about where you've really done the best working, what type of management brings out the best in you, what your natural skills are. And you can use some tools like Clifton Strengths or career direct evaluations. These are assessment tools, and they'll give you some idea of, what your strengths are in a work environment. And a lot of times I encourage people to do Clifton Strengths, and for the $15 or so it costs to buy the book and get the access code to the online evaluation, it will tell you your top 5 business-oriented strengths, work-oriented strengths. And so those are helpful often, I think, to find a voice for questions. So some people will ask you what your strengths are. And so you can tell them, and it's not like your own opinion or your wife's opinion. It's this assessment. And, the more you find it accurate, the more you can comment on, yeah, I took this assessment and it was amazingly close to what I think my natural skills are. And here's what they are. The other thing that Clifton Strengths provides is the description, because some of the names they use for strengths are not obvious. Strategic, for instance, is common. I'm strategic is one of my strengths, but what does that really mean? In the Clifton Strengths perspective, the word that they use, strategic, means that you're able to recognize opportunities that other people don't. They just don't see it the way you see it. So you can say, strategic. I see opportunities that other people don't recognize. So that's Clifton Strengths and the career direct evaluation. And so that's good to know as well. And then that can also inform your job search, right? So if you know that in the past that a certain management structure and environment was good for you, then you can seek out those types of opportunities as well. And you find that out through informational interviews, likely. You talk to people inside the company and say, what is it like to work there or inside that department? A couple of key questions that we're going to require some research to answer beforehand is, what are your salary requirements? Okay, and so you can go on salary.com. I used that recently with a candidate, or I like BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, bls.gov. And both of those platforms will give you a range. You can search on titles, okay, specific titles. BLS.gov is organized by economic area. So Dallas-Fort Worth, for instance, is an economic area. So you'll get salaries that are associated with that location. I think salary.com, you can also put in the city that you work in. And the BLS.gov also tells you how many people in that area have the same title. And if you want an eye-opener, look up project manager. I mean, there's like 10,000 of them in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's a lot of them. So a lot of people have that title. So that'll give you a little idea what the competition is. But, when you're out of work, you ought to have an idea what what the market is for the positions you're seeking. Okay. And let me just say, right here, how you answer that question is this little phrase, and this is from Jay Fusaro. For the responsibilities of this position, I would expect. Okay, and then give a range. Okay, between X and Y. And that range is based on what you looked at. And so that's Jay Fusaro's perspective. You definitely want to find out what the budget for the position is. And if you go to workshop, he'll show you he'll talk to you about some other options. And one of the options is to try to delay the conversation until you know a little bit more. My perspective on it is just, do your research and answer the question with a range that you found. Okay. Now, some of the resources you may find will not give you a range. They'll just, give you the midpoint or the average. So Rex Sowett, who I mentioned, is a recruiter. His advice in that regard is you take that midpoint and you increase it by 10% and discount it by 15%. So 10% higher and 50% lower, and that's your range. So that's about a 25% wide range about the middle, the midpoint that you've done through your research. And then he goes even further and he says, and then you put a range on the range. Okay, so let's say it's 100K, right? So you're going to say my range is from 85 to 110K. But instead of saying that number, you just would say, well, somewhere in the mid 80s to low 100s, or low 110s. So that's even putting a range on a range, okay? Because early in the process, there's a lot to learn about the company and about how you can help them and about what exactly their challenges are. And so, but you want to put in a pretty broad range because you don't want to knock yourself out. Early in the process, this is a knockout question. So be prepared with your salary range. You also need to know your budget, because if you're applying for jobs that are going to stress your budget, no need getting yourself in a difficult financial situation. You don't have to volunteer for that. So if you want to be a project manager and you need to meet your budget, something at the high end, then have that conversation, because you need to find that job that can help you with your budget. And if it's not a match, it's not a match. Just you're going to spend a lot of work interviewing with this company with some misconception about how much they're going to be able to pay you, and that's just wasting your time. Another question that you want to be well prepared for is, why did you leave your last position? Now, for some people, that's very straightforward, and this is the question I coach on. They're often curious. Now, in the COVID era, if you worked in hospitality, restaurant business, it's going to be pretty obvious why you had to leave your job. The only question maybe is how many other people had to leave the company when you left. So that's pretty straightforward, but there is a strategy you want to use, and I'll go over right now. You want to say, thanks for asking. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot at my previous company, and then give a very brief comment about the reason. Okay, there was a reduction in force, there was an office closing, an office relocation. Maybe you just left because you had you're moving toward another objective, you wanted some growth, you had an opportunity, whatever it is. But then you want to transition, okay? You don't want to just that to be the end of the story, is here's the reason I left. You want to transition to a story about something you learned or something you contributed, some success you had in that role, okay? And transition with the rats, I'm going to talk about in a couple of more slides. A rats is a story told backwards, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about stories and star stories. And so this is a strategy where you tell the result of your success first, okay? Instead of doing the standard technique, situation, task, and then action, and then the result. I like this question. It's going to pop up here. Would you go back to work for your previous employer? So this is a trick question, and when I heard it, I just loved it. And what is the answer to this question? Well, this cuts to a little bit to your attitude, okay? Being prepared, and you've been laid off, you're out of work, it's a stressful situation. And would you go back to work for your previous employer? And so most people's response to that is, yes, I contributed a lot there. I liked working there. Yes, I would go back. But that's not what your new employer wants to hear at all. They want to hear how you're going to help them. Okay, so the answer is no. And the answer and the attitude needs to be, that was so yesterday. I'm moving beyond that. Here's where I'm headed now, and it's to help you, okay, to help you out. So part of your preparation is getting your head right as well, okay? And we have a session on that as well. It's one of the later sessions. I don't remember which one, but being confident, having what's the word I use? Cultivating confidence. Okay. Let's keep going now. Okay, so we prepared. Now we want to get a good start. Okay, and don't ask for business cards. It's not going to be available. Have your notes and questions in hand, okay? You're going to show up even in a video interview, and I think almost all of them are video, but lately, like the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had some candidates come through the pit crew who have face-to-face interviews. One of them was even a dinner meeting, which sounded kind of dicey to me, but that's what's happened. So people are getting a little, some companies, I guess, are desiring, face-to-face conversations. Of course, you can sit across the table and you can do the social distancing, but it's coming back. I think that's a good sign. But so bring your note, have your notes that you prepared and your questions in hand. And when I say notes, you may have your list of star stories that you want to tell. So if I get asked this, I want to tell this story. Just not the whole story, but just some reminder about the categories of star stories you have. How I helped, how I grew revenue, how I had extra level of commitment, attention to detail, processed a whole bunch of transactions in a short amount of time. Your list of stories and notes, your questions as well. And you can verbalize this when you're in your work product. So work product is really helpful. And again, like the Clifton strengths, having some work product to share helps you find a voice to tell the stories about how you helped and the things that you achieved. And but sometimes, that may be a little dicey because the things you did are considered confidential by your previous employer. So I've had some candidates come through the pit crew who actually sought out and received permission to use some of the documents that they had prepared. And for whatever reason, the company felt maybe they, it was 2 or 3 years old, or, it wasn't that confidential to their operation. So they will, if you ask, they may allow you to use those documents, as, especially if they've had to lay you off, if they've had some financial struggle, and this is the necessary consequence, then you may be able to use those documents. You just need to be sure and ask permission. And when you share them, you can, mention also that you have permission to use them. Now, in a case where that's not going to work out, where there's, you can't bring anything with you, or, your job really was not so much about producing work product analyses or data sheets, presentations, your work product can be your analysis of the job description. And so I've taken a look at your job description. I've got it right here. It seems to me that one of your top priorities is, I have experience and I've helped my previous employers achieve that, for example. Okay, so now you're going to go through the themes based on the analysis that you've done. Okay, and of course you'll be asking questions when you're done about, how does that sound? Does that match up with your current most important priorities? So bring some work product to share. I suggest you lead with your statement of enthusiasm, okay? Express your interest in the position right up front. And when I mean lead, you come in the door, you say, hello, I'm Mark McDonald. And, I just wanted to let you know that I'm really interested in this position because, okay? And so you're going to give them a couple of very specific reasons why you're interested in that position. So that answers the question, why this job? Okay, why are you interested in this job? Now, some interviewers will ask you, they may ask you just this straightforward question, why are you here? They may ask you, how can you help me? Okay. but some won't. And I was one of those. When I interviewed candidates, I would take kind of the preponderance of the evidence, right? I'd ask them questions, they'd give me answers, it was all said. And oftentimes I was interviewing people who already were employed, right? So they were thinking about changing jobs. And so, I just tried to assess, indirectly why I thought, how enthusiastic they were about coming to work, okay, for me. But you can get right ahead of that. I mean, you don't have to wait till they ask. You can just tell them right up front. And I think that's a good setup. Why are you interested in this job? And of course, that's something you got to think about as well. And it's an opportunity. And it's a silver lining to be unemployed is you can target your job search to just about anything you wanted to do. Now, you're going to be more competitive where you have experience and achievements. But if you want to work in a slightly different industry, you get a chance to do that. And you might be enthusiastic about, a new opportunity, slightly different, something that has alignment with your achievements in the past. Okay, so you want to lead with that and give 2 specific reasons. Okay, so that's part of the introduction, the very first thing you say. Come on. Okay. 80% of the time, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the time, there's a couple of data points on this. You're going to get an opportunity to make an opening statement. Okay, we're going to talk about that next. Okay, and this may come in different ways. The one we use most of the time in the pit crew is tell me about yourself, but it could be, tell me about your background and how it applies to this position. So they're asking you to give an assessment of your background skills and how it applies to what they're looking for based on the job description at this point. They may say, let's go over your resume. Do not go over your resume. Okay, whatever they suggest as an opening, an opportunity for you to make an opening statement, you are going to open with how you can help. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, and then after you deliver that, and this is going to be 2 minutes long, you're going to start asking questions. Okay, so right away, this is where you start to launch off here on this graphic. Right away, you're going to start finding out what their most important priorities and beginning a conversation. Okay, you may have had some interviews already that were very conversational. You may have felt really good about that because that's, when you get an opportunity to have a conversation with a hiring manager or someone who's assessing you, that's so much better than an interrogation, right? Where they ask you questions, you provide answers, and in the end, you're going, well, I answered all their questions, but I haven't heard back from them. Having a conversation 2-way where exchange of ideas helps build rapport, and it's the better way to, be able to tell your story in an effective way. So let's back up though and talk about the tell me about yourself question, or your chance to make an opening statement. 78% of the time you're going to get a chance to do this. The other 20 or 30% of the time you don't, you're going to have to work it in. Okay. And so here's the formula that I use. This is a 2-minute opening statement. Okay. So it's important that it be brief. And you need to cover some very specific things. Okay. And you're going to, this is something you're going to want to practice. Okay. 2 minutes is only about 270 words. And what you're going to have to practice is, calling out all the things you want to say, okay, and just getting it down to the essential important details. But you want to start very briefly with your professional training. Unless you have a connection, grew up in the same place, went to the same high school or something like that, which you may know and you may want to mention, okay. Otherwise, it's purely professional. I did on-the-job training. My first job out of high school was XYZ. I found out I loved it. I've done it ever since. But it could be, a degree in accounting, could be military service, whatever got you started, and from a training perspective in the career that you're in now. You also want to mention if you speak any languages, and maybe a bit about yourself. I mean, something very quick. You might say, well, I've lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 25 years. So that's a little personal tidbit. You might even say, I love to play tennis. We had a candidate the other day who was like a professional downhill skier. Just a little tidbit about his, when he was in college, He was a kind of professional athlete, but in a very unusual way. So that kind of differentiates. So just something very brief. You then want to segue. So that's about 15 seconds. But, that's how brief it is. You then want to segue into 3 relevant examples from your analysis of the job description and the research you've done about how you've helped your employers in the past. Okay, how your skills, abilities, knowledge, and in particular achievements will make you a top performer in this role. And so the way to think about that is just as you're preparing, just say, here's how I believe I can help you, A, B, C. Okay, name the 3 ways you can believe you can help. And I often now, more recently, I've started asking people after their interview is over, after their practice interview is over, is to make a list of all the ways they have helped in the past, okay? And be very granular about it, okay? Small things matter. If you may do something small, but you just do it over and over and over, and it has a big impact, that's being helpful. And then, go through that list, pick out the ones that you really enjoy doing, the ones that you're more of a natural at. So that's good to know, those 5 things, let's say. And then you want to figure out, when you come across a job description, okay, of all the ways I've helped in the past, which of those apply to this future job? Okay, and I suspect, it's going to be a pretty big list, of ways you can help. And now you've got some meat to work with, and to say, well, after you analyze the job description and you bring your analysis in and you make this opening statement, I've done some thinking about this role, and here's how I can help you. And so you may say, here's how I can help you, grow your business, for example, and then you're going to give an achievement. In my last role, I increased revenue, or I increased my quota by 50%, from 1 to 1.5 million over 12 months. Okay, that's it. That's the achievement part. Now, guaranteed, as they go through the interview, they're going to want to know how you did that. Okay, and they'll ask you. Well, you mentioned you grew your revenue contribution by 500,000 in 12 months. How did you do that? Okay. So, but 3 areas of how you can help that you've identified, and you get about 15 seconds each. Okay, so after a minute now, you've given your professional training and you've talked about 3 ways you can help them out, with some achievements to back them up. And then you're going to spend the next minute finishing your motivation story. So with your statement of enthusiasm, you've told them why you're interested in that job. Okay, they're still going to be curious about why you're interested in coming to work for them, and they may be interested in why you're coming to work for them now. Okay, so part of your story may be, I've spent 5 years as a junior level accountant, and then another 5 years as a senior accountant, and I'm ready now for management or leadership. Okay, so that's kind of why now, part of your story. Why now? This is the arc of my career. I love doing accounting work, especially quarterly closes, and I'm ready for leadership, and so that's why I'm talking to you in this situation. And that's why I'm talking to you now. Even though you may be unemployed, if you put it in a bigger context, put some more what's the word I want to use? Emphasis on your candidacy and why it's a good match for them. Okay, so you want to tell them why you want to come to work for them and why this company. Now you can include in this, things you've learned about the company that you find interesting or attractive. But okay, this whole introduction is not about you. Okay, this whole opening statement is not about you. And it is and it isn't. Okay, it is because it's your stories, it's your strengths, it's the things that you like to do, it's the ways that you've helped. But you're telling them the stories because you want them to understand how you can help them. So it's really all about them, how you can help them. And so that needs to be your perspective. So your motivation is important in this context, because they want, not only could you help them, but you're motivated to help them. Okay, I just covered that without bringing it up. But All right, so I love this. About a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was on a panel with Jack Bick. I mentioned Jack. He's one of the career coaches that volunteers with the pit crew. And he gave this feedback to the candidate, which I thought was, just a beautiful phrase. At the middle of the interview, so we just talked about getting a good start, preparing and getting a good start. Okay, so now the interview's going. And by the way, that getting a good start was like, I forgot something here. Hang on. Okay, let me say something here. One more thing I want to ask, and I briefly mentioned this, but let me reinforce it. So once you finish your 2-minute introduction, you're going to go right into asking questions about what their most important priorities are. So the basic setup here is I've told you the ways I can help you. Well, I've told you about my training. I've told you the ways I can help you. I've told you about my motivation. Okay, so now it's your turn to tell me, what are your most important priorities? And don't settle for the first answer. Okay, you really want to dig in on this, because this is setting up the rest of the interview. Okay, because if you've hit it right, you're going to get confirmation that the homework you've done was right on target. The star stories you've prepared, you can use. Okay, but there's a good chance that this particular hiring manager has a different emphasis or has some other items in mind, and so you want to discover those. Okay, and you want to be very tenacious. Let's use that word. You want to be very tenacious about it. You're just not going to accept a glib answer or a perfunctory answer. So what are their most important priorities? They may tell you one or two. You say anything else. Okay, what else is important to you in this role or this hire? Okay, what are the characteristics of top performers in this role? What are the soft skills that successful people in this role have? Okay, so there's a whole science, and we have a session on asking these questions where you ask a very positive oriented question, because you want to be one of those successful people. You want to be a top performer. You want to know what it takes. Okay, that's just the kind of person you are. Okay, and you're going to have, as a result, you're going to have a much better conversation through the rest of your interview after you get the answers to those questions. And this, I say that I mentioned this, I'm being a little forceful myself, because it may be a little awkward. Okay, and some people say, well, isn't that kind of rude? And we're like 3 minutes into the interview, and you're starting to ask questions. Well, no, it's not rude. You're asking questions with a purpose. The purpose is to figure out how to be as helpful as you can, to be successful in this role, to be a top performer, to make their life easier. So ask away until they, until you're satisfied. Okay. Don't feel like, what is the, if you were the interviewer, what are you going to think? This person is very pushy. No, you're going to think this person really wants to understand how they can be a contributor, how they can be a top performer. It seems maybe counterintuitive, but they're going to be impressed with your tenacity. Okay, somewhere that got lost, but we'll figure it out later. Okay, so you're not like 5 minutes into the interview now. You've told them why you're enthusiastic to come to work there, what your motivation is. You've talked a little bit about how you can help. You've figured out that what their most important requirements are. And now they're going to start asking you questions about some of the things that you've mentioned, or other things, or other questions on their list. And so this middle part of the interview is a conversation created by you. This is what Jack Bick said a couple of weeks ago when he was on a panel I was on. And it's a conversation created by you. That means you're responsible for turning this interrogation, this question and answer period, into a conversation. So where you learn more and more about them, and they learn more and more about you. And you do that by asking questions, okay? And so we already mentioned your pre-prepared list of questions, okay? These are the kinds of things you want to be sure and ask up front, the things you want to be sure and ask as the interview is closing, and maybe some others that you want to intersprinkle in the middle of the conversation when you get an opportunity. So those are your pre-prepared questions, but there's also questions that I put in the category. I think Jack calls them pop-up questions, but they can also be, I use several different phrases in this presentation. Sometimes I call them continuation questions or reaction questions. Okay, so a pop-up or continuation question is they ask you, tell me about a time when you had a disgruntled client. What did you do? So you tell them, great story how you had a disgruntled client and you worked with them and you turned the account around and you actually increased sales. You got twice the normal order the next time. And then you can ask a question. This is a pop-up question. You can say, well, when you have a disgruntled employee, what are they usually disgruntled about? Good question to know. And you may even ask, how often does that occur? Is that every week? It's 2 times a year? So there you go. And so those are pop-up questions or continuation questions or reaction. You're reacting to something they ask you. And it's the opportunity, it's the best opportunity when they brought it up, okay, to learn a little bit more about the requirements of the position and what kind of people are successful in this position. And so now we're kind of back to this question about, when was the time we had a chance to promote somebody? What did they do? Okay, because hey, you want to be promoted as well. But it also, that asking that question gives the hiring manager a chance to talk about their style. Okay, and so you get to learn what kind of manager they are and what they value in the people they have promoted. Okay, the third kind of question is what about questions? Okay, this is an opportunity maybe to redirect the conversation. So let's say you get in a conversation about Agile methodology. I don't know if you guys know Agile. It's a way to develop software primarily, but it can be used for lots of different things. And so they want Agile experience. They ask you a question about how you've done Agile. And then you may say something like, well, what about using Agile in the sales forecasting process? Okay, not a typical application of Agile, but if you have some experience in it and it's been a successful experience, then ask the question and you may open their eyes to something they never thought of. And then of course you're well prepared for the boomerang, because if somebody asked me that question, I'd say, well, what do you think about using Agile in the sales forecasting process? Why don't you tell me? I mean, I'm interviewing you after all. And so now you get a chance through a pop-up question, a what about question, to introduce a new topic that other candidates may not even have broached and that the interviewer may not have even thought of. So how intriguing is that going to be? Now, when you're asking these questions, you need to be respectful. Okay, you are not the interviewer. You're not trying to hijack the interviewer. You're not trying to put the interviewer on the spot. Okay, so you don't need to ask a question like, what do you say to all those negative Indeed reviews you have? That's not the time. You want to ask your questions in a formal way. So how are you respectful? You may use the indirect question approach, a question and a question. Would it be possible for us to have, for me to ask a question at this point? And then, if they say yes, then ask your question. Or you might say, I was wondering about, or do we have time to discuss? Okay, so that's, you ask a question and then you ask your question. Okay, do we have time to discuss other ways you can use Agile? And so they may have a list of questions they want to do. They may have a very formal interview process, so your request may fall flat. But be respectful. A good way to ask some of these questions is to express some curiosity. I'm curious to know how, or I'm curious to understand. When you have clients who are unhappy, what are they unhappy about? So that's also a very good way to introduce the questions. And be aware of the time it's going to take, okay? Because, asking the interviewer to answer a question is a good way to build rapport. But if it's going to suck up a bunch of the time that they had allocated to ask you questions, they may feel at the end of the interview that they didn't get a good read on you. And that's not going to be good for your candidacy. So if you have a 30-minute interview, you're probably not going to be asking a lot of questions outside of the introduction questions and the closing questions, maybe one somewhere in the middle. If you have 45 minutes or an hour or even an hour and a half, that's like fire away. I mean, you are prepped. You know, if it's an hour and a half, it's going to be a conversation one way or another, right? So you can lead, you can have several questions. You should just, you know, you should take your opportunities to ask pop up and what about questions, because there's plenty of time to have a conversation. It's been scheduled that way. Okay, let me talk a little bit about other ways to structure your stories. Okay, so some companies want to hear star stories, and you know, as an interviewer, I appreciate star stories because I know what's coming. So the situation can just be, you know, when I worked at ABC Corp and I was the manager of quality, so just location and title, very brief. The task, okay, was, you know, what needed to be done. The company was struggling. Sometimes we can call this a challenge, okay? The company was struggling with one particular manufacturing process that had a really low yield. So that was and I was leading a 3-person team to figure this out. The action, okay, the action is what you did. Okay, your team may have done various different things, but what they want to hear is what you did as part of that, and then the result. Okay, so that's the STAR format, and Amazon and Google and other the North Texas lead insists upon using this format. But there's other ways to tell structured stories for effect, and I mentioned 2 slides ago about rats. Okay, so rats is a star story told backwards. You actually tell the result first. Okay, so this came up in the context of why did you leave your last position? Okay, so you're going to tell them why you left. You learned a lot, you contributed a lot. You know, the company had laid off 100 people and 10 of them were in counting, and I got laid off as a result. You know, they needed to reduce expenses. But one of the things that I'm most proud of that I did there was, you know, and you mentioned the result. Okay, would you like to hear more about that? Okay, so you've already told them the result. You can then tell them the action and the situation. Okay, so you're telling the story in reverse. Different ways to think about this. And lately I've become interested in the CAR, not just because it's the pit crew, but that's a challenge, action, result. Okay, a PAR is problem, action, result. A RAW is a reverse story. Again, it's result first, action, and why, motivation. Okay, why did you need to do that? CAR is challenge, action, result, and there's some variations on star stories as well. So a star story, star plus Q, is a star story that's immediately followed by a question, and this is something you've prepared in advance. You know, if I get a chance to tell this star story, I'm going to ask this question as soon as I finish. Okay, so the example I gave about challenging customer, well, you know, as soon as I tell that story, if I get asked that question, as soon as I tell that story, I'm going to ask the question I ask. You know, when you have a disgruntled customer, what are they upset about? And then another version of the star story is the learning experience. Okay, so when you get asked a negative oriented question, tell me about a time where you failed, tell me about a time where a project you were working on didn't meet its goals. You know, then you want to tell the story, and the result includes what you learned. Now, the result may not be, you know, totally positive because, you know, it was something that missed, but there's a learning experience that needs to be mentioned as well. So that's what the star plus L is. So these are different ways to present structured questions, and, you know, come to the regular PICU webinars and work with the coach to figure out the best ways to tell these stories in your situation. Okay, so we've done the preparing, getting a good start, the middle of the interview. Now we're going to talk about finishing strong. And so you got to ask your remaining high priority questions, the ones that you haven't asked, that you prepared in advance. You're going to show off your work product if appropriate. If you've brought some work product and it's now the interview is winding down, then you may want to mention, you know, I brought this 60, 90-day plan. And now let me say that an acclimation plan is not, I'm going to meet all the people, I'm going to learn all the problems. You need to show up with an achievement plan. Okay, this is what I plan to achieve, not just onboarding. Okay, so but if you're 30, 60, 90-day achievement plan, I think the things that you can sort of promise that you're going to be able to get it done. Now, you don't know the environment inside the company, so you may be off a little bit, but this is an interview. You're just displaying the homework that you did because you're so interested and motivated to come to work there. Your T cover analysis, I mentioned analyzing the job description. That may be something you want to show at the beginning, but it's also homework that you did to understand better how you can help and contribute. So that's part of your work product as well. And I'm gonna have a whole list of things here. You're gonna figure out, how much time is this gonna take? So this is important to know that that you need, as you budgeting the time and asking questions, you need to leave time at the end for you to find out some things that you need to know as the interview is winding down. Of course, you want to find out what the next steps are. You want to find out who you can call if you have another question. You may want to even suggest that you have a follow-up call in a few days. We've had some interesting discussions today. I'm sure I'm going to have another question or two. Could I call you? Let's see, today's Wednesday. Could I call you at Friday, maybe say like 10 a.m. And who would I call if I had a question? Okay, get the name and their phone number. You do want to ask for feedback as well. My perspective on this is the best time to get feedback. Okay, if it's an unfavorable choice for them, they will never tell you why. Okay, there's no upside for them at all. And actually, if you ask for feedback now, how do you see me fitting in? They may not answer that question as well. Okay, but you get a chance to look them in the eye and see how they reacted to that question, and that'll give you some indication of how they feel about you. And they may say something like, I'm sorry, but it's not our policy to provide that feedback. If they're trying to be conciliatory, I think that's a good sign. If they're just saying, nope, can't give you that, it's probably not going to go favorable for you. Okay, but ask for feedback. And there's lots of different ways to do this. You can be direct. If you have some hint that there's something wrong, you may want to just be very direct. Is there something that is missing, from my background that you'd like to see? But you can also just be more general. How do you see me fitting in? Do I have the requirements that you need? Is there anything else that we need to discuss? Is there anything we missed? Now, asking them questions like that is assuming that they didn't ask enough questions to begin with, so they're a little dicey. But if you have some sense that things have gone south and you want to figure out what it is, maybe to turn it around, or maybe for the next interview, then now's your time to find out. So try not to be shy about that. And then you want to close. You want to tell them the ways that you've talked about that you can help, how your experience matches up. You can refer to your opening statement and your statement of enthusiasm, why you were interested in this job. Again, this is about them, not so much about you. Okay, you may love doing accounting work. You love doing accounting work for them, and they need accounting work. Okay, so it's not. This is a common mistake that people make, is they talk too much about what they'd be interested in doing and don't take the employer's perspective. And then you want to ask to be advanced to the next step. Okay, or ask for the job if you're talking to the hiring manager. Now, this does not literally mean ask for the job. Now, if you're feeling really strong about it, you may say, I've identified all these ways I can help you. I'm really eager to get started. I'm available on Monday. How do you see me fitting in? So now you're kind of sort of indirectly asked for the job. You're really expressing your interest in coming to work for them. Okay, and I think that one of the documents I'll post up for you guys, 200 questions that candidates may ask interviewers, has several options on how to ask for the job. So that's one of the nice things about that document. So look for 200 in the title. Okay, let's review real quick, and then we got some special topics. So here's from start to finish. Okay, you prepare, you deliver your statement of enthusiasm, you answer the question, tell me about yourself, 2 minutes, ways you can help, why you're motivated to come to work for that company. You're going to start the conversation right after you make your opening statement. Okay, and you've got your series of opening questions to discover what's most important to them. There's a couple of them. You're going to continue the conversation, okay, as the interview goes on by asking well-placed questions with deference, to the interviewer, formal questions in a question. You're going to tell your star stories. You're going to be well prepared to answer the salary question if it comes up, and why you left your last position. If it comes up, you're prepared. That won't cause you any consternation. Brevity is better, especially for phone interviews. Just remember that. Brevity is better. Show off your work product. Ask your closing questions, next steps, feedback. Be enthusiastic. And it asks to be advanced to the next job. Express your interest in coming to work for them. Now, and afterwards, you're going to have some follow-up activities. So we're going to talk about that real quick. You want to send thank you notes, and thank you notes are getting kind of old school. You may want to consider doing a video. The Who You Know group from through Frisco Connect, they spend a lot of time and have several meeting sessions, regular workshops, I guess you'd call them, on how to use video in your job search. And so I think that's the modern way to do it. But if you're going to send the old-fashioned thank you note, I recommend that you write it out by hand and you scan it or photograph it and then you email it in. You just never know if the regular snail mail, when it's going to be delivered or if it's going to be delivered. But an email with a scanned or photographed picture of a handwritten thank you note, says you made the extra time and took the extra effort to actually write that out, and here's some evidence of it. And if you've arranged to have a follow-up call, then do that. If you say, how about 10 o'clock on Friday, I'll give you a call, and they agreed to that, then make those calls. Don't forget. And even if you don't get them, you can start the process of following up. Let me talk a little bit about things to avoid now. Panel interviews are a little tough, right? So the things to remember in panel interviews is to pay attention to all the interviewers, okay? Don't focus on one to the exclusion of the others. And some people will have this little saying they use to fill up the time. That's a great question. Well, don't use that either in a panel interview, because one person's great question is somebody else's not so great question. Okay, so otherwise, panel interviewers are much harder to build rapport in, to turn into a conversation, because there's three people, sometimes 4 people asking your questions. They all want to get their questions in, and so it's a challenge, no doubt. You can still do it, just need to be careful with it. And we have in the webinars, we talk some more about how to deal with panel interviews. But just recognize that it's going to probably be more questions. Brevity is going to be very important here. And yeah, panel interviews. Disagreeable or argumentative interviewers, and so the leading interviewer, wouldn't you have to agree to me that you're overqualified? That's a leading question, right? So now you're going to disagree. No, I'm not overqualified. Okay. So just don't take the bait. Answer that question with the answer to the motivation behind that question. They're concerned about you not being interested in the job, after doing it a few months because you have so much experience. They're concerned about you leaving because the salary's lower than your expectation. There's some other concern that's bringing up this question, and you need to address that. And the 64 toughest interview question document that I have will talk a little bit about this. But one of the phrases you can use, is I would never take a job that wasn't acceptable to me or wasn't that I wasn't enthusiastic about. So you want to reassure them that you're not going to come and leave shortly. You're not going to take a job if the salary's too low, et cetera, et cetera. Really friendly or chatty interviewers. So there's a lot of interviewers out there who are not very good at interviewing, okay? And that's the chatty interviewer. They may dominate the conversation. So the way to deal with that is you just start telling them stories from the job description. You've done your analysis. You know how you can help them. Now it's the time to use a RATS. So would you like to hear a time about, would you like to hear about a time, where I increased my revenue contribution by $500,000. Okay. So if you get a moment, you just start asking these questions, or you can even just say, if it's, chatty, I see from your job description that you really need X, Y, Z. I've got a lot of experience with that. For example, okay, you just basically break in and start telling a story that's relevant. So no matter how much they talk, okay, in the end, they're going to be asked to give an assessment on your candidacy. And if you haven't had a chance to talk, they have nothing to go on. Okay, so that's the way it's going to go. I mean, they're going to give you a negative response. So, break in. Be a little forceful if you need to be. A really friendly interviewer is a bit of a trick. Some interviewers are just polished enough that you believe you're having just a conversation, shooting a breeze. And they're really kind of embedding questions inside of the comments and expecting you to answer them. And I've seen this happen, heard about this happen with Amazon interviews, HR interviews with Amazon. And so just remember your interview and work your answers into the conversation. All right, that's how you deal with that. Now, the distracted interviewer, the unprepared interviewer, and the uninformed interviewer are the same way with the chatty interviewer, but it's a little easier, right? Because they may admit to you something like, I just got your resume 10 minutes ago because the person who was supposed to interview you is not available. And so it can say, okay, well, great. Here's what you guys are looking for. Here's how I can help. Here's some of my experience. You're all well prepared to just start feeding it to them. And then they have, quite a bit to make an assessment on. And of course, you're enthusiastic and prepared about it. So there you go. You've got those handled. The silent treatment. So you may be asked this question. It's often done when you have a difficult question. So tell me about a time that you failed. You answer the question. You give a 90-second story. You talk about what you learned. And then nothing. It's this awkward silence at the end. Well, it's a technique to see what you'll divulge, to see if you'll go extemporaneous, see if you'll, start talking dirt on your previous company. So don't fall for that. Okay. Tell your story, wait a little bit. You may offer to tell another story. Would you like to hear about? Or you may just say, did I answer your question? Or is there anything else I can add to that? And so get them to talk, right? But don't fall into the trap of, trying to fill the void by rambling. The very technical question is really not a question at all. They're not looking for an answer. They're looking for how you think about answering tough questions. So, and if you think about it, a lot of jobs, engineering, product development, the problem you solved last time is not the problem you have to solve today, right? So new problems are the norm. So how do you deal with new, complicated, difficult to answer tasks? Okay, what's the process you use? So it's really a question about how you think. And so give them an answer about how you think. Okay, here's some common suggestions for improvement. Speaking too much or too little. And these, when I say suggestions for improvement, this is feedback that candidates often get, at the end of their practice interviews. And so star stories are very powerful, and telling a story is a good way to draw the interviewer in, to a lot of people. This is true about people in general. They won't remember what you said. They will remember how they felt about your story. And so telling a story in the structured format helps that process along. They celebrate at the end when you have the great result. They say, they get a very positive feeling about you, and they may not remember the story. They may remember the result, but they'll certainly remember that you had some, good stories, relevant, and specific ways that you could help them out. So it gives them a very positive feeling. But people talk too long. They don't use the format. They get really tied up. with the situation. And this was my problem when I, first started doing this. My perspective was you couldn't understand how great my solution was unless you understand how challenging the situation was. So I spent way too much time on the situation. But situation is probably the briefest part. Sometimes they'll go into great detail about what they did. Okay, that's great. But they forget to tell the result. So a couple of strategies for this. When you start trying to make these things 90 seconds, you're going to find out for some stories you just can't fit it all in. So don't fit it all in, especially the action part. You can say, the way I solved this was I did 5 things, and the most important, the top 2 were A and B, and then the result was I saved the company $500,000. Okay. Now you said there were 5 things, but you only mentioned 3. Okay. So if they're interested in that story, if you've hit something that's important to them, they'll want to know what the other 3 was, and they'll ask you. But otherwise, you may have missed, and no need wasting time talking about those other 3 things if they're not interested in it. Okay, so that's a technique for shortening your star stories. You don't tell them all the action, tell them some of the action. We refer to the rest, see if they ask a follow-up question, then you get a little more time to talk about that. Do not forget to tell the result. I mean, the whole goal of the star story is to get to the result within 90 seconds. Okay, a lot of people just don't tell the result. They're talking about what they did. Okay, this is what I did, but they're not talking about how it helped. And so that's what the result is, how it helped, what the positive, and that seals the story, the positive result that came from the story. Wandering off into the weeds, so some people just start talking. Some people will spontaneously add additional information that don't be above and beyond what the question was. And this was related to getting the silent treatment from the interviewer. So don't do that. Have an idea what you're going to say it, and then you can transition into asking a question, or you can ask them, did I answer your question? Okay, to make sure they understand you finished. Star stories. A lot of people talk about we did this, we did that. We had this situation, we had this challenge, we all worked together, and we had a great result. Interviewers are not hiring your team, they're hiring you. So in the action part of it, you definitely have to talk about what you did, your part. And if you don't want to use I, you can say my part. My part of this problem was this. So the situation may be a group situation, the task may be a group task, the result may be a group result, but the action's got to be you, what you did. Don't make that mistake. Not being specific enough. Now this is a double-edged sword, because I just talked about people getting lost in the details, telling too much of the details. Some details are important, some details aren't important. But talking in generalities is like it was in a book, is a complete loser. Okay, you haven't told. Well, I mean, the suspicion is, and I've had this happen to me, is that you read it out of a book. You've never actually done it. Okay. So you need to include metrics, and especially metrics that only you would know. Okay, those kinds of details are important. How much money was involved, how many transactions were involved, what % improvement there was. Those are details. And metrics, what were the metrics? If you're, and put them in context as well, because you can say, well, I processed 50 applications a week. Well, okay, is that good? I don't know. I mean, so, but you can say something like the average employee, the average or the standard was 35, we had to get 35 done. My average was 50. Okay, so that puts that in context. Otherwise, it's just a number that has no meaning. Is 50 good? Is 50 bad? Who would know? Fumbling a negative-oriented question. So some people lock up. Frankly, they just don't have an answer. But a negatively oriented question needs to be redirected to the learning experience, what you learned from the thing that went wrong. Okay, so that's how you handle that. Not being positive all the time comes up quite a bit. Okay, and most of the time people don't even realize that they said something a little bit negative. But think about it. you got to think if you're tempted to say anything at all negative, just avoid it. Okay. And sometimes this leaks out if you're not completely, okay with your situation. You may go negative on your previous company, coworkers, bosses. So you got to work that out and think about, and it's good reason, good reason to practice, and then listen to yourself and see if any of these kind of negativity comments are coming out. And I mentioned this already. All right, I'm not going to make my goal. All right, next time I'll do it shorter. Okay, but this is my last slide. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, showing enthusiasm. So now we got to talk a little bit about getting ahead of the game. And it's not just, being excited or talking fast or, changing the inflection of your voice. In the webinar, I talk about, showing enthusiasm for introverts. It's the things you do, okay? And even if you're, not loquacious and talk and, conversation comes easy to you, you can demonstrate enthusiasm by simply saying it. So there's your statement of enthusiasm, why you're excited, interested, intrigued to work at this job. Use positive, affirming statements, So we had a candidate the other day. Every time we ask her a question, she said, okay, yeah, good, sure. And she started telling this story, very positive little quip. And she did it consistently. So you might say it might have been a crutch for her, but it came across as, yes, she was positive, excited, eager. You want to show your work product, as I mentioned before, that's a good demonstration of how interested you are in the position because you brought something to show off. You want to ask questions, okay? Asking questions is a great way to engage the interviewer, and they come across thinking you're much more interesting and interested. And of course, ask for the job at the end, no better way. Another way to set yourself apart is to, is to pause, okay? Pause, it's okay to pause. They ask you a question, especially a behavioral question. You may take a moment or two to figure out what's the best story you want to tell. So take that time, just don't start talking, okay? So pause to frame your answer and then deliver a very succinct and well-chosen story. That'll be much more effective. If you get a direct question, so this is not an open-ended question, it's not a behavioral interview question, answer and then provide an example, okay? Too short an answer is just to give the answer. It's a direct question, how many times in a month do you do X, Y, and Z? You say 5. 5, for example, last month, I did 3 the first week, 2 the second week, and then nothing happened for 2 weeks. So there's a little detail, okay? Just took a few seconds to, make that direct question more interesting. Connect the dots for the interviewer. So sometimes they don't understand, they don't see the connection, okay? And so you just need to fill it in, and that means, that's a great phrase to use, right? So for instance, my Clifton strength, I'm strategic, okay? And that means what is strategic is such a nebulous word. So I say I'm strategic, that's one of my strengths. And that means I recognize opportunity where other people don't. Curiosity is really endearing. I just got to use that word. It's endearing. Somebody who's curious to know, understand, learn. So that phrase, I'm curious to know, understand, or learn, I'm eager, that's a very endearing quality in people. And then also, attempting to build rapport by asking questions and personalizing those questions. And this has to be honest and real. You just can't say these phrases and magic will happen. If they're coming from your heart and you really want to make a connection, then it'll be much easier to have the courage to ask these kinds of things and to build that relationship in the moment, in the 30-minute interview, in an hour interview. That'll set you apart. And the pop-up questions and the continuation questions I talked about are another good way. Do you express your interest because you're asking for more information or you're engaging in a tangent that's associated with what was just discussed. So that's powerful as well. And then the indirect questioning is the question within a question. So it's a formal way to ask a question. So it helps, it's respectful to the interviewer to ask questions in that format. All right, here's a few phrases, and you guys can read those real quick. But lots of different ways to phrase and demonstrate your enthusiasm. Being pleased, being grateful, being admiring something that they said or admiring their company, complimenting them are all good ways to build rapport, express enthusiasm. 5 minutes over.
All right, so a couple questions here, really not a whole lot. I guess Melissa wants a copy of those pants that are on slide number 5, wants to know where you can get them at. She wants to be able to give them out for Christmas coming up. So
fantastic.
Any suggestions where to get those at?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're hard to find. And once you found them, they'd probably be expensive.
There you go. Slide number 5 right there. All right. Well, if anybody can find them, please let us know, because we'd like to, and I guess they'd be appropriate to wear on a Zoom call because people wouldn't see you from the waist down.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. I have them on right now.
You have one on right now? Oh, good. Okay. Cindy asked, does it look negative on you if you were the person or if the person laid off during a merger and acquisition after analysis of roles and responsibilities? It tends to seem, I guess it seems to make you look indispensable. So, I guess if there were 2 of you doing the same job and you got let go, how do you frame that?
Well, so one of the top reasons why people get laid off is because of some change in the organization, right? So, the classic example is the new CEO comes in, and, after a month or 2, he's going to start replacing his direct reports, some of them. Okay. And then that trickles on down. So
did his audio go down?
Pardon?
Yeah, your audio has gotten quieter for some reason.
Wow. I wonder what caused that. Is that better? No?
No. Try muting and unmuting and see what happens.
Very, very low.
Let me.
Might be timing out.
It's the pants.
I agree. It's the pants.
Okay, mute. And now I'm back.
No, it's still really quiet. So you need to yell.
All right. I don't know what's causing that, guys. Yep, I used up all my time. Let me look at the audio settings real quick, see what happened, if something switched. Volume's okay. I'm gonna turn my off, on. Any good?
Yeah.
All right.
That's
No?
better.
That's better?
Yes.
All right. So I turned my computer microphone on and off and on. So now what I was saying, so a merger and acquisition is, a definition of a change, okay? And so the second part of change being the primary reason is there's some financial driver as well. So you don't have to go into details about the comparison, of A versus B or reduction. When after the merger occurred, there was redundancies, 10 people in the accounting department were considered redundant, and I was one of them. There you go. And then you're going to transition right into some success story or achievement, or something you learned. I've just been trained on, SAP, or some positive comment that gets the conversation going into how you can help them. Okay, not so much about what happened to you, because that's the past. It's how you can help them. So just lead them right into it.
All right. Well, that's really, there really were no other questions here. So Mark, thank you very much for your time. I guess you get the next 5 weeks off. We'll see you in January again, unless you just happen to pop in for another session. Please be sure to join us every week. Career DFW and Career USA, we've got some great programming coming up. Let's see here, come on slide. So tomorrow, our effective resume session will be on from 1 to 2 o'clock. And we're going to focus on advice from experts, advice that we hear from other people. So we'll get that information out to you all tomorrow. On Friday, the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, our topic will be open forum. We will talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. So come bring some career questions and we will answer those questions for you. Somebody will have opinions on those things. Next Tuesday, our LinkedIn presentation, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Ruth Lipsky will be our speaker, and she'll be talking about LinkedIn special features for job seekers. So hopefully you'll join us for that. Next week, next Wednesday, for interviewing our special guest interview speaker series, Carol Buckel will be with us. She's going to talk about secrets for an effective interview. And then upcoming, after that, the week after that, Jack Bick will be with us, Clarity When You Need It Most. We will not have a session the week of Thanksgiving. And then in December, we have interviewing with Gail Bridgman from the Frisco Career Transition Workshop, Distinctive Interviewing with Walt Glass, and then Tony Bashir will be with us from Babbage & Associates about the 10 biggest mistakes that people make in interviewing. So you're going to get a lot of great different tips and tricks over the next 6-7 weeks during the month of November and December. And then back in January, we will start the workshop over again. All these sessions will be recorded. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career FW Facebook page and also will be on the Career USA YouTube channel later this afternoon. Follow us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're on YouTube, we suggest you click on playlist where you see the green arrow and you'll see the 5 or 6 playlists that have been created already. And don't click on the video, but click underneath where the red arrow is where it says view full playlist, and up will pop all the different sessions that have been recorded. So here on the interview, you can see session 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. And if you scroll down, you keep seeing all the rest of them. So this session here will be on the top of this. But you can go back and watch any of those sessions you need to, if you need to review something. And here's a list of all of them that are on the YouTube channel. So Mark talked about the first 5 being preparing for an interview, the second 5 are actually during the interview, and then the last 3 just some bonus things and other things to talk about. So please note, Career FW is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no full or part-time employees. I'm a volunteer, Mark is a volunteer. We're all here to help you land your next great opportunity. We survive on donations. Please consider making a donation when you get your next job. Help us to continue to do what we're doing. If your company happens to offer matching donations, please look us up. If you don't see our name on the list, reach out to me, allow your donation to double in value. So Mark, once again, thank you very much for your time. Everybody else, thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you later in the week. Mark, you have something else?
Hang on for a second.
Okay, don't leave anybody.
Well, I just posted up 3 files. So 200 questions job candidates may ask you. So that in particular has some good ways to ask for the job, but there's a whole bunch of other categories in there it's worth looking at. Here's the Google interview prep guide where they talk about star story. So a little more of their perspective on how to deliver a star story and what they're looking for. And they also talk about answering hypothetical questions, which is a good topic. And then the 64 interview questions is the full title is the 64 toughest interview questions. And so this is a great document, not just for the questions and the answers they give, but the strategies that they use to approach difficult questions. So you want to study up on those and some good resources for your homework.
Okay, and for those people on Facebook, if you'd like to get those documents, just send an email to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, DALLASPIT crew, CREW@gmail.com, and let Mark know that you'd like to get those 3 documents and we will get those to you. So everybody, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all tomorrow or at another session.